Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse, and in this recording I'm going to be exploring the astrology of August 2026. So we have another big month ahead. We continue with that cradle pattern that was the signature mark of July, and that's going to be in effect for the first couple of weeks of August up until around the 11th of August. So that's still there in the background. We have a building conversation between Jupiter and Saturn. It will occur right at the end of the month, but it's going to be building up throughout the month. We have Mars changing signs, Chiron going retrograde, and then we're also going to have eclipse season as well. Now, eclipses are intimately tied up with the nodes. And I just wanted to mention that the nodes, the North Node and the South Node, they have just moved into Aquarius and Leo. So the South Node in Leo, the North Node in Aquarius. And I spoke about this in the reading for July, talked about the meaning of this. But the important thing to note now is that because the nodes generally move backwards, they are now on the 29th degree of their respective signs. And so that means they are on critical degrees. The anaretic degrees are accompanied by a feeling of urgency. There's a sense that something is breaking down. We're in liminal space, and there are some urgent feelings coming up that are connected with these nodal themes. So generally, the theme of the South Node in Leo is letting go of pride, of self-centeredness, arrogance, overconfidence, taking too many risks and gambles. Leo energy, of course, is beautiful and creative and fun and playful and childlike, but when we're looking at the South Node, we always have to look at the shadow side first to get to what we might need to release. So in our own personal charts, we might be finding that there is some kind of acute story that is centered around where we feel the need for constant praise or a validation in order to create. And in fact, that's actually hampering our creative energies. But on the world stage, we might be talking about some kind of purge of characters who are very egotistical, or where there's sort of pride comes before a fall sort of scenario. I mentioned that with Jupiter opposing Pluto, because of course Jupiter is now in Leo as well. So there might be something about that. There might be stories that are connected to royalty, also maybe to the acting world as well, because Leo is associated with the theatre. And then there's the corresponding push towards the North Node in Aquarius, which is also critical on that final degree, which basically says we urgently feel the need to go towards the group, to find people of like mind, to feel connected to the wider community. Our focus needs to be on innovation that in some way benefits the group, the crowd, rather than singling out certain people to shine. It's got to be much more communal. Our focus needs to be more communal. It needs to be less me with the South Node in Leo and more us. It's more about us together in Aquarius. So that dynamic is going to form a backdrop for quite a long time, because these nodes are going to hang out on these degrees right up until the 9th of October. I use the true node, by the way. There are different ways of calculating the nodes, like there are different ways of calculating Black Moon Lilith. So you can use the mean node, which always moves backwards. It never goes forwards. It always moves backwards. And that sort of smooths out the calculation, so we get something a little bit more orderly. or the true node, which very occasionally, for just very short periods of time, sometimes even just a few hours, the nodes can move in direct motion. And that's why they sort of hover sometimes on certain degrees. And I like to use the true node for that reason, the fact that every now and again it sort of changes direction, can produce some interesting effects in the progress chart as well. But this is why it's hanging around on this degree. And this is why if you calculate your chart on astro.com or perhaps a different software, you might see there's a slight difference in dates sometimes when we're talking about the nodes and their movements, because one program uses the mean node and one program uses the true node. So, moving into the month on the 3rd of August, this is when Chiron stations retrograde. Of course, it's the first station retrograde in Taurus, because Chiron's only just recently moved into Taurus. So it stations retrograde at 0 degrees Taurus and 52 minutes. It'll go back into Aries on the 18th of September, and then it will station direct in Aries at 26 degrees 16 minutes of Aries on January the 6th, 2027. And then it will finally return to Taurus for the journey proper through that sign on the 15th of April, 2027. So Chiron is basically going to return to Aries to just finish up the work there. But generally speaking, when Chiron goes retrograde, like any other retrograde, it is about going within to tend to the winds, as it is with Chiron, to look within. What have I ignored? What have I not been dealing with when it comes to my healing journey? What is it that I still need to learn? Because Chiron is also about teaching and mentoring and learning. So where might I be missing some kind of education? Where might I need to get more information? So Chiron's just prompting these stories. And in Taurus, it's centered around Taurus themes initially, which are to do with our security, the connection we have to our physical body, our relationship to money, our energetic relationship to money, and also sort of emotional insecurities, not just security when it comes to money and resources. It's emotional stuff as well. Where do I feel safe enough? It might be issues to do with survival, how we survive the world and how it is. So Chiron retrograde will bring all of these stories into play. On the 6th of August, Venus will then enter Libra. So that is immediately going to bring up an opposition to Neptune and then a trine to Pluto. So we're getting a lot of these really big stories over and over again because these planets are still very aligned with one another, the outer planets and the social planets. Every time another planet activates one, it tends to activate another. So Venus going into Libra, generally speaking, means that Venus is now in her happy place. She is in the sign that she rules, the other sign that she rules. And this is the sign that is super focused on relationships, and Venus is to do with the heart. And so this is seen usually as a useful transit, a good transit. But we do just have to get past that opposition to Neptune. Of course, there will be an opposition to Saturn as time goes on as well. So we're being told really that in order for our relationships to be peaceful, Venus in Libra is very concerned with that, peace and diplomacy, and making sure that we've got the other person on side and being sweet and kind. The problem is that the opposition to Neptune can mean that we end up overly romanticizing, or we kind of give ourselves away. We give too much because Neptune has no limits, and we want to impress. We want to fulfill some kind of dream or ideal that we have about how relationships can be. The trine to Pluto will encourage us perhaps to focus on a more empowering vision of our relationships, and also just remind us that generally speaking, we are stronger together, and friendships are very important as well with this connection. Sometimes when we're in a relationship, we can sort of see less of our friends, and that happens in life, of course, it happens, but we don't want to end up cutting off from the other people that are important to us. So Pluto will just come in to remind us of that. So Venus enters Libra on the 6th of August. It'll oppose Neptune and trine Pluto on the 10th of August. If we just go back a day, 9th of August, that is when Mercury enters Leo. So it exited the shadow zone from the last retrograde. It's had all that time in Cancer because we had the retrograde in Cancer. So now finally we have at least some mental change of territory as Mercury goes into Leo. The only issue is, of course, it'll run straight into an opposition with Pluto. So we get that sense of, I want to think about things in a more playful way. My mind is occupied by wanting to be entertained and interested in lots of different things. And I want to talk about my ideas to other people. But then we have that opposition to Pluto, which can sometimes mean that we have obsessive thinking, or we're intensely concerned with how other people are receiving our ideas. Mars then goes into Cancer. This is on the 11th of August. So this brings a change of focus when it comes to how we are using our energy and where we are using our energy. Mars is our drive and our will, our passion. And in Cancer, Mars traditionally can struggle in this sign. It's seen as the sign of its fall because it's exalted in Capricorn, the opposite sign. And really why this is that the sign Cancer is ruled by the moon, and therefore it is a very emotional sign. It's a water sign. So generally there is a lot of sensitivity here. Now Mars can stir this sensitivity up. In fact, it can be very, very good for defending what we hold dear, for standing up for our family, or defending our land, defending our place. But sometimes when this transit is in play, it can also stir up a lot of emotions because Mars tends to have an action of agitation. So we've got a certain amount of agitated feelings coming up. Now, if we're kind of generally feeling okay, then we might channel a lot of that energy into productive things going on behind the scenes. So we're getting jobs done at home, perhaps those that require a lot of physical energy. We're decorating, we're fixing things. Mars can be associated with tools. So we're getting on, decluttering, we're, maybe even deciding to initiate some kind of family get together. And so we're spending a lot of energy on that. Or this can simply be stirring up these feelings. And of course, the feeling that often is associated with Mars is anger. And in Cancer, we're talking about old anger, old resentments. And that's the thing that we have to just bear in mind. It's very rare that Mars in Cancer is explosive, sudden anger, outbursts. It's more something that has been bubbling away for a long time. So we need to just pay attention wherever this is happening in our own charts. Where might I be harboring some kind of resentment here? What is this anger about? What's this feeling that's coming up? To just be aware of it and work through it. Because beyond anger and sort of resentment is the ability to be able to act on our gut instincts when working really well at its best. Then we can absolutely trust our instincts to guide us. When we're in Cancer, we feel it. We feel it in the gut. We know exactly what to do. And Mars is the action. So if we're feeling clear enough then we can get some really good internal guidance that will help us to decide what needs to be done and when. Another really good expression of Mars in Cancer is that it simply motivates us to care more in this area of our lives. So again, wherever it's happening in your own chart, I'm now feeling motivated. I'm going to nurture this area of my life. I'm going to care more for the things that are happening here. I'm going to spend some time and energy here because I feel that it's important. So we can get different expressions of Mars going through Cancer. There is going to be a nice sextile to Chiron on the 12th of August as well. So that's kind of motivated to heal, motivated to bring things together. We're initiating some kind of remedy or a fix if there's been some kind of problem or conflict. So again, we've got something constructive happening here. I also wanted to mention that Ceres is also going to enter Cancer. That's on the 12th of August as well, the same day that Mars forms a sextile to Chiron. And so Ceres and Mars are going to be traveling quite close together pretty much for the remainder of this month. And it just increases this sort of mama bear kind of energy because Ceres herself is incredibly protective. Of course, there was the whole story about Pluto taking her daughter away, making her his queen, and Ceres raised the earth to the ground because she was so angry about what had happened. She was just not going to accept this, and eventually they had to broker a deal so that her daughter could be returned to her for 2 seasons each year, spring and summer. That's when Ceres is really happy. So we've got this really strongly protective energy coming into play, again, in our Cancer house, that immediately is put into some kind of action with Mars. So I think we can see then where we have to be a bit conscious here of where we might be overly protective and to the point of being smothering. That's the shadow side of Ceres, that she wants to have the control of everything, which is ironic because that's more of a Pluto expression. But Ceres can sometimes be very all or nothing. It's either springtime, summertime, or it's winter and there's nothing doing. So this all or nothing energy might start to come into play. Again, just to watch what's coming up, what's happening here. Generally, if you can just focus on, let's just nurture this area of life, take care of this area. What does it need? Try to identify, what do I need here? What feelings are coming up here that I need to gently take action on? Now, the 12th of August is also going to be the date of the first of the eclipses for this season. So there's going to be a solar eclipse followed by a lunar eclipse. This solar eclipse will take place at 20 degrees and 2 minutes of the sign Leo. And it is going to be the first of the Leo eclipses since the south node moved into Leo. I'll be doing a much more extensive look at this over on my Substack on the premium tier, where I look at the chart in depth and explore all of the asteroids that are connected to this lunation, and we explore the Sabian symbol as well. But just generally speaking, just to remember that a solar eclipse means that this is a amplified new moon. So there is a very important new start that is also bound up with some kind of letting go. I get the sense of almost like dropping the mask, because this is a sign that's associated with playing a part, with the theatre, with acting. But we can't do that anymore, says this solar eclipse conjunct the south node. We can't just play a part just to get the attention that we want, or the praise that we want. We have to be true to ourselves. And that is when we come into our own. To get some kind of sense of what this might mean for you personally, have a think back to August 2018, because we had a solar eclipse a couple of degrees away from this point. So it was very nearby. So it doesn't mean that exactly the same events happen, but sometimes it does mean that there is a connected theme in some way. So just have a think back and see what was going on around that time, and then just compare it to how things are emerging around this time. On the 14th of August, Pallas will station retrograde. This is going to be important because we're going to also have Vesta going retrograde as well. So that's going to be on the 25th of August. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But it kind of feels like there's a lot of emphasis on our Aries house for a lot of review over the next few months, because we're going to have Saturn retrograde here, Neptune retrograde here, Pallas and Vesta, and then Chiron will come back into Aries as well, as I was saying earlier. So our Aries house is going to be receiving a lot of this very reflective, internalized energy, which might feel a little uncomfortable because Aries is much more about go get him, let's go, let's do this. It's a very dynamic, outward focused sign, generally speaking. But now we're being asked to really look within and take this energy within. What is it that drives us? What is it that motivates us? Pallas retrograde is about sort of trying to solve some kind of internal issue, some kind of internal problem that is perhaps stopping us from being dynamic and being go-getting and being independent. It might simply mean that we've got to change a strategy here in some way about how we're going about getting the things that we want in life. Pallas is going to retrograde from 22 degrees of Aries, 38 minutes, and it'll go back to 3 degrees and 18 minutes of Aries and station direct on December the 1st. So during that time, you have time to rethink your strategy and explore any patterns of behavior that are stopping you from being confident or stopping you from pressing forwards and dealing with conflicts in life or dealing with challenge. Now, around this time as well, there's going to be an interesting triple conjunction. I just noticed this also in the sign of Leo. So we're getting some attention on these fire houses. There's a triple conjunction that is building up here with Mercury conjunct Jupiter on the 15th of August, and then Hygeia is in the middle of them. So Mercury will conjoin Hygeia on the 16th of August. Jupiter and Hygeia actually met on the 6th of August. But generally speaking, we have 3 bodies here. Hygeia is actually one of the biggest asteroids. She's actually bigger than Juno, a lot bigger than Juno. So we talk about the 4 main asteroids being Ceres, Pallas, Vesta, and Juno. But if we were going to talk size, Juno wouldn't get a look in here because Hygeia is much, much bigger. And so as it has a big body, a lot of weight to it, I tend to give it some wider orbs of influence. And it definitely seems to have some kind of weight, astrologically speaking. Hygeia is associated with hygiene, cleanliness, preventative medicine, Hygeia, hygiene, the words are connected. And so she has this quality to her that's very visionary because she has the power to look ahead. She is a seer, so she can look ahead and see what's coming and take preventative action if necessary. So that's the really excellent side of Hygeia. The shadow side is kind of trying to sort of preempt a situation and taking some kind of action that's actually not necessary, and it sort of interferes with the potential. But here it feels like we're trying to clear the way because there are big ideas, there's big plans coming into play with Mercury conjunct Jupiter. This is mind expanding. It could also be big conversations as well, really big talks happening that perhaps are for the purpose of preventing problems later down the line. That might be something that's going on a global level. Big talks that are focused on perhaps even literally preventing disease. It could be things that are centered around children or young people, perhaps as well, because we're in Leo territory. And it could also be talks about making some kind of changes. And just again, bearing in mind all of this is taking place opposite to Pluto. The changes that we need to ensure that we stay creative and that life is also fun, as well as it being about work and business and, what we're going to do for our goals and all that kind of thing. We need to be able to express ourselves. We need to be able to let loose and kind of have some fun sometimes. And so Hygeia might be looking at what do we need to provide to ourselves and to people to ensure that we're able to express our creativity and express our light. So moving on from there, we've got 17th of August, Mars will square Neptune. So here we've got some kind of confusion happening. Neptune tends to dissipate our energy when it connects in this kind of way with Mars. So usually Mars is like, let's get it all done and get it done yesterday. But Neptune is now demotivating. It's like, I can't see the point. I don't really see the results of my efforts here. I'm feeling disappointed, so I can't be bothered. It takes the energy out of it. So the biggest issue is also that Neptune tends to bring up illusions. And so if we're taking action based on something that is not real, some kind of imaginary threat, for example, then obviously our defensive maneuvers might be a bit too much. They might just be completely unwarranted. And then we've got Ceres there in super protective mode, like I said before. So we can see how this could end up being a little complicated. So the main thing that we need to do here is be sure of our intuition, to be really connected. What am I feeling? Why am I doing this? And that's really the best question you can ask with this aspect in play. Before you do anything, why? What is at the heart of this? What's underneath everything? What's going on in my unconscious? Where am I tempted to act out of fear about what might be taken from me instead of just looking after what I have? The sun enters Virgo then on the 23rd of August, so we go into Virgo season, and this is the time of year when we are perhaps more focused on the little things, on making small improvements. Personal self-improvement is an interpretation of the sun going into Virgo. So it's just going to highlight, of course, our Virgo house, which is where we need to be a bit more focused on details, where we need to be efficient, where we need to be very, very practical, where we need to feel useful. So the sun going into Virgo is also going to tap into what are your skills and where might your skills need to be kind of leveled up? What else do you need to do to increase your knowledge here? Remember, Virgo is ruled by Mercury. And then Mercury is also going to move into Virgo on the 25th of August. So now we're really thinking about our work, our daily life, our routines, our health, how we can make things better. Generally speaking, how can I make things better? It's going to illuminate all these little pieces of the puzzle. And so it pays us to pay attention to the little details, the small picture. We don't want to sweat the small stuff, but we do have to pay attention to the little things, because sometimes it's only a little tweak to life or to our circumstance or to our routine that actually can change everything. If you've ever read, is it James Clear who wrote Atomic Habits? I think that's just like a perfect example of Virgo energy at work. If you want to change your life, you just have to start with one little tiny thing, and then you stack one habit upon another, upon another, upon another, rather than sort of saying, right, tomorrow I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be perfect. That's Virgo. Virgo in a nutshell is like about perfection. And, to try and do things as best we can is great. But if we have a perfectionist outlook, then nothing is ever good enough. And so we spend life just feeling really dissatisfied and nothing improves. So little tiny habits, little changes, and to remember to celebrate those little changes as well, because otherwise it can sort of get lost in the midst of everything else, and we sort of feel like, oh, I'm not changing things quick enough, or things aren't improving quickly enough. Give yourself some time to appreciate that these small changes add up over time. I mentioned before that Vesta is going to go retrograde, so this is on the 25th of August as well. It'll station retrograde in Aries at 24 degrees 48 minutes of Aries, and it'll go back to 12 degrees 41 of Aries, stationing direct on the 29th of November. And so Vesta speaks about what is sacred. What is sacred to us? She's a hearth goddess. She keeps the eternal flame alive. That was what the Vestal Virgins did in Rome to ensure that Rome never fell. And so it feels super important to tend to the inner flame, particularly when Vesta goes retrograde. It's almost like, oh, I need to tend to this flame because it's in danger of going out. So Vesta might help us to identify, where are you losing motivation? Where are you feeling that your devotion is wavering? Your commitment is wavering. So Vesta will help us to identify what actually is sacred here in your Aries house, what is worthy of your time and attention and devotion. And so this will be the task as Vesta goes retrograde in Aries. On the 27th of August, the Sun will also conjoin Mercury. I just wanted to flag this up. This is the superior conjunction because Mercury is moving in direct motion, but it will move from being a morning star to an evening star. So we start to shift gears now. We're starting to be a little more reflective because Mercury is going to move into evening mode. And then on the 28th of August, we have the lunar eclipse in Pisces, and this is the last of the Pisces eclipses in this series. And the eclipse will be at 4 degrees 54 minutes of Pisces. Again, I will be doing a deep dive into this chart over on my Substack. But generally speaking, when we have a full moon, we are at the peak of the lunar cycle. It's amplified because it's a lunar eclipse. It's amplified a bit more because it's the final eclipse in Pisces. And so we're acutely aware of where there needs to be some kind of conclusion or release or realization around our Pisces house. Collectively, Pisces is associated with our spirituality. It's the imagination, it's creativity, the unconscious. It's a very dreamlike place. And, sometimes when we have the lunar eclipse in Pisces, it is actually about releasing an old dream, something that could never happen, something that just didn't happen, something that we were idealizing and hoping for, but it's time to let that go now. The shadow of the Earth across the moon as we go through the lunar eclipse is bringing some kind of earthly, practical realization. The reality is overshadowing this emotional need, but at the same time, it's also showing us what is possible in this part of life, which dreams are relevant. And it's also just generally encouraging a much more spiritual approach. Maybe the lunar eclipse in Pisces is actually helping us to make real some kind of spiritual practice or some kind of spiritual realization. It brings it home to us. So if you're willing to let go of illusions, then it makes way for something much more truly spiritual to take its place. And then on the 31st of August, we finally have the big aspect that I talked about at the beginning between Jupiter and Saturn. So this is a trine aspect. So of course, we've just had Jupiter trine to Neptune. That was part of the cradle pattern, but that has now sort of broken down. But now we have this trine to Saturn, and this is actually quite stabilizing because Jupiter is about expansion, Saturn is about contraction. Jupiter in Leo is very kind of big and flourishing and dramatic, whereas Saturn is just kind of, okay, let's just tone this down a bit, but not to the point where there's no excitement at all. There's still some excitement with these two, and we can get the feeling that the growth that's happening or the opportunities that are coming by in our Leo house are now really helping us to establish ourselves in our Aries house. Maybe it's helping us to get past our restrictions in our Aries house, or the problems in our Aries house, or this feeling of doubt, doubting ourselves. Saturn in Aries can sometimes manifest as that, or we just kind of resist doing the work, or we're not being very accountable. So Jupiter coming along, Jupiter in Leo coming along and forming this trine to Saturn says actually there are really good opportunities here for creative development, and to make the best of that you need to commit. You need to commit to doing this, to overcome your self-imposed limits. So I think this Jupiter trine to Saturn is actually a very, very helpful aspect, and it is the first of three. So we'll have another one on the 3rd of April next year, and then the final one will be on the 12th of July next year. The degrees for this trine will be 13 degrees of Leo, 13 degrees of Aries. So if you have anything around 13 degrees of these signs, then you're going to be picking up some vibes from this really creative trine. So this brings me to the end of this reading for August 2026. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please do click a like and subscribe. It always helps the algorithm. As I mentioned, I do have a Substack. I also have a website. Readings are sometimes available on my website. If they're not available, you can always send me an email and I will put you on my wait list and let you know when the next batch are released. I also have social media, so all those links will be below. I will see you again soon. And in the meantime, I wish you many blessings on your path.